The woman appeared at the edge of Adam Harlow's property just after dawn, her dress torn and muddy, her dark hair tangled with bits of prairie grass, and in her trembling hands she clutched a handful of wild blackberries that stained her fingers crimson like guilt itself. Adam had been checking his fence line when he spotted her, this stranger who moved with the cautious steps of a wounded animal, her eyes darting between the rows of vegetables he had spent 3 years cultivating in the unforgiving Wyoming soil near Belmont. The town itself lay 5 miles south, a dusty collection of buildings that had sprung up along the railroad tracks in 1867, and it was now the summer of 1882, a time when the West was still wild enough to keep a man on his guard but civilized enough that a woman alone in the morning mist was cause for concern rather than alarm. He watched her from behind the corner of his barn, this tall cowboy of 26 years who had learned loneliness the way other men learned their trades. She knelt beside his berry bushes, the cultivated ones he had painstakingly transplanted from the rocky hillsides, and picked the ripe fruit with desperate hunger. Her movements were quick and furtive, and something about the combination of her obvious need and her equally obvious shame made Adam's chest tighten in a way he had not felt since his mother died when he was 15. He cleared his throat and stepped into view, keeping his hands visible and his voice gentle. "Morning, miss. Those berries treating you well," she gasped and spun to face him, dropping half her handful in the process. The berries scattered across the earth like dark jewels, and she stared at him with eyes the color of storm clouds, wide with fear and defiance mixed together in equal measure. Her face was gaunt, beautiful in the way of fine bone china that had been handled roughly, and he could see the dirt beneath her fingernails, the exhaustion in the set of her shoulders. "I did not mean to steal," she said, and her voice carried the lilting accent of somewhere far from Wyoming, somewhere across an ocean he had never seen. "I was hungry. I can work to repay you." Adam studied her for a long moment, taking in the desperation written in every line of her body. He had been alone on this land for 8 years, ever since his father drank himself to death and left Adam with nothing but debt, and 160 acres of stubborn earth that fought every seed he planted. He had learned to read people the way he read the weather, looking for signs of trouble before it arrived, but all he saw in this woman was trouble of a different kind altogether. "How long since you ate something proper?" he asked. She lifted her chin with a pride that seemed to cost her something. 2 days, maybe 3. I lost track." "Come inside," Adam said. "I have biscuits from yesterday and some bacon. You can tell me your story over breakfast and then we can talk about work if that is what you want." Her eyes filled with sudden tears that she blinked away furiously. "Why would you help me? You do not know me. I was stealing from you." "Berries grow back," Adam said simply, "and I have more food than one man needs. My name is Adam Harlow. This is my land, such as it is, and you are welcome to breakfast without obligation." She hesitated, and he could see her weighing her options, calculating the risks. Finally, she nodded once, a sharp, decisive movement. "My name is Grace Orson. I came from New York 3 weeks ago. I answered an advertisement for a mail-order bride, but when I arrived in Cheyenne, the man who sent for me took one look and said I was too plain, too foreign, not what he wanted at all. He left me at the train station with nothing." The words came out flat and factual, but Adam heard the humiliation underneath them, the wound to her pride and her sense of self. He felt anger kindle in his chest for this unknown man who could treat another human being with such casual cruelty, but he kept his voice steady. "Then he was a fool," Adam said. "Come on. The biscuits are getting stale and that bacon will not cook itself." He turned and walked toward his cabin, trusting her to follow, and after a moment he heard her footsteps behind him. The cabin was small but well built. With a stone fireplace he had mortared himself and windows he kept clean, even though no one ever came to visit. He had made it a point of pride to keep the place orderly, as if maintaining the external trappings of civilization could somehow fill the hollowness inside. Grace stood in the doorway uncertainly until he gestured to the rough-hewn table and chairs. "Sit, please. I will get the fire going again." She sat with the careful movements of someone unused to kindness, her hands folded in her lap, and Adam busied himself with the familiar routine of reviving the coals, setting the pan on the heat, slicing thick strips of bacon from the slab he kept in the cool cellar. The sizzle and smell filled the cabin, and he heard her stomach growl audibly. "Tell me about New York," he said as he worked, trying to put her at ease. "I have never been further east than Omaha." Grace's voice was soft when she answered. "It is crowded. So many people all pressed together, working in factories, living in buildings that block out the sun. I worked in a garment factory for 3 years after my father died. My mother passed when I was born, and I had no other family. The work was hard, the pay was little, and I thought, perhaps a new life in the West would be better. I saved for a year to pay for the journey." Adam turned to look at her, this woman who had crossed a continent on hope alone, only to have that hope crushed by a stranger's rejection. He thought about his own loneliness, the way the silence of the prairie could feel like a weight pressing down on a man's soul, but at least he had chosen this isolation. Grace had had it forced upon her. "How did you get from Cheyenne to Belmont?" he asked. "I walked part of the way. I caught a ride with a family in a wagon for a few miles. They were kind but poor themselves, and they could not help me further. I have been sleeping in a barn on the edge of town, trying to find work, but the shopkeepers, they say they have no need for help." A woman alone, without references, without family, it makes people suspicious. Adam divided the bacon onto 2 plates and added biscuits he split and fried in the bacon grease until they were golden. He poured coffee from the pot he always kept warm and set the food in front of Grace with more coffee for himself. She stared at the plate as if she could not quite believe it was real. "Eat," he said gently. "Please." She picked up the fork with shaking hands and took a bite, and he saw her eyes close briefly with relief. They ate in silence for a few minutes, and Adam found himself studying her face when she was not looking. She could not have been much past 21 or 22, he guessed, young but with the kind of weariness that came from hard living. Her features were delicate, her nose slightly too long to be fashionable perhaps, but there was a beauty in her face that had nothing to do with conventional prettiness, and everything to do with character. When the immediate edge of her hunger had been satisfied, Grace set down her fork and met his eyes directly. "Why are you doing this? Men do not help without wanting something in return." "Some men do not," Adam agreed. "But I figure we are all just trying to get through this life without too much suffering, and if I can ease someone else's burden without harming myself, well, that seems like the right thing to do." "You are a religious man?" Grace asked. "Not particularly," Adam said. "My mother was, though. She taught me that kindness costs nothing and might mean everything to the person receiving it. I try to remember that, even though I fail at it more often than I succeed." Grace tilted her head slightly, studying him with an intensity that made him feel exposed. "You said I could work to repay you. What kind of work did you mean?" Adam had not actually thought that far ahead when he made the offer, but ideas were forming now, possibilities he had not considered before. "I have a garden that needs tending. The vegetables are doing well enough, but I have been trying to expand, plant more variety." There is a whole section of land near the creek that I cleared last year but have not had time to properly cultivate. If you know anything about growing things, I could use the help. And the cabin could use a woman's touch, I suppose, though I hate to phrase it like that. What I mean is, I can cook and clean well enough, but there are things that, well, I am not good at making this place feel like a home rather than just a shelter. You are offering me work and a place to stay. Grace asked carefully. I am offering you honest work and honest pay, Adam said. There is a small room off the back of the cabin that I use for storage. It has a window and a door that locks from the inside. I could clear it out, make it habitable. You would have your privacy, your own space. I would pay you wages, the same as I would pay any hired hand if I could afford one. And you could eat from the garden and the kitchen. It would not be an easy life, but it would be honest and safe. Grace was quiet for a long moment, her fingers tracing the rim of her coffee cup. You do not know me. I could be a thief or worse. You came to admit you took berries, Adam said softly. A thief would have just taken them and said nothing. That tells me something about your character. I only admitted it because you caught me, Grace pointed out, but there was a faint hint of humor in her voice now, the first lightness he had heard from her. Maybe, Adam allowed, but you still could have run or lied. You did neither. Look, Miss Orson, I am not a fool and I am not making this offer out of charity, though I would help you even if I got nothing from it. The truth is, I could genuinely use the help. This land is more than one person can manage properly, and I have been running myself ragged trying to keep up with everything. If you are willing to work hard, and I suspect you are, then this arrangement benefits both of us. Grace looked around the cabin, her gaze taking in the clean floors, the orderly shelves, the small touches that spoke of a man who cared about his surroundings even in isolation. What will people in town say? A woman living on your property working for you. Let them say what they want, Adam said, though he knew it was more complicated than that. Belmont was small enough that gossip traveled fast and could ruin reputations, but he found he did not care as much as he probably should. If it becomes a problem, we will figure something out. Maybe we can tell people you are my cousin or something. Lying seems like a poor way to start an honest arrangement, Grace said, but she was almost smiling now. Fair point, Adam conceded. Then we will tell them the truth. You needed work. I needed help, and anyone who has a problem with that can take it up with me directly. Grace set down her coffee cup and straightened her shoulders. Then I accept your offer, Mr. Harlow, with gratitude and with the promise that I will work harder than any hand you could have hired. I will earn my keep and my wages, and I will not give you cause to regret your kindness. Adam felt something shift in his chest, a loosening of tension he had not even realized he was carrying. Call me Adam, and I suspect I will not regret anything. Let me show you the room and then we can figure out what needs doing first. The storage room was dusty and crowded with tools, old tack, and the accumulated debris of years of solitary living. Adam looked at it with fresh eyes and felt embarrassed by the state of it, but Grace just rolled up her sleeves and said, I have seen worse. Help me carry these things out and we can clean it properly. They spent the morning working together, hauling out equipment that Adam relocated to the barn, sweeping away cobwebs and dust, scrubbing the single window until it let in clear light. Grace moved with efficient purpose, and Adam found himself matching her energy, surprised by how much easier the work felt with another person beside him. They did not talk much beyond practical discussions of where things should go, but the silence was comfortable rather than awkward. By midday, the room was transformed. It was small, perhaps 8 feet by 10, but it had the window overlooking the garden, a sturdy door, and enough space for the narrow bed Adam hauled in from the barn where it had been gathering dust. He found clean sheets in his mother's old trunk, linens that smelled of lavender sachets she had made years ago, and Grace made up the bed with practiced efficiency. "It is perfect," she said, and he could hear the emotion in her voice. "Thank you, Adam, truly." "You are welcome," he said, "truly." They ate a simple lunch of bread and cheese, and then Adam took Grace out to show her the garden in detail. He walked her through the rows of vegetables, explaining what he had planted and when, pointing out which plants were thriving and which were struggling. Grace listened intently, occasionally kneeling to examine leaves or soil, and he could see she had some knowledge of growing things. "My father had a small garden behind our building in New York," she explained when he commented on her familiarity. "It was only a tiny space, but he grew tomatoes and herbs, and he taught me how to care for them. He said that knowing how to coax life from the earth was a skill that would never fail me." "He was right about that," Adam said. "Out here, knowing how to grow food can mean the difference between eating well and going hungry. The land is hard, but it gives back if you are patient and persistent." They walked down to the creek, and Adam showed Grace the section of land he wanted to develop further. It was rich bottomland, dark soil that would be perfect for crops, but it needed clearing of the remaining brush and careful planning of what to plant where. Grace's eyes lit up as she surveyed the space. "You could do so much with this," she said. "Beans and squash, certainly. Potatoes in the heavier soil near the bank. And over there, where it is sunnier, you could expand the berry bushes. Maybe plant some fruit trees, though those would take years to produce." "You have a good eye," Adam said, impressed. "I have been so focused on just maintaining what I already have that I have not thought much about expansion. But you are right, this land has potential." Grace turned to look at him, the afternoon sun catching in her dark hair and turning her eyes silver. "Then let us make something of it. Together." That single word, "together," resonated in Adam's chest in a way he had not expected. He had been alone for so long that he had almost forgotten what it felt like to share plans with another person, to use "we" instead of "I" when thinking about the future. It was terrifying and exhilarating all at once. They worked through the afternoon, Grace helping Adam repair a section of fence that had been damaged in a recent storm. She proved surprisingly adept with tools, her hands quick and sure as she held boards steady while he hammered nails. They developed an easy rhythm, anticipating each other's movements, and Adam found himself talking more than he had in months. He told her about buying the land from the bank after his father died, about the years of back-breaking work to make it productive, about the loneliness of watching other men in town find wives and start families, while he remained alone by choice and circumstance. Grace listened without judgment, occasionally offering observations or questions, and in turn she told him more about her life in New York, the crowded tenement where she had lived, the factory where she had sewn buttonholes 12 hours a day until her fingers bled. "I thought I was coming west to be someone's wife," she said as they worked. "I thought I would have a home and maybe, eventually, a family. It seems foolish now to have built up such hopes based on letters from a stranger." "It is not foolish to hope," Adam said. "Hope is what keeps us going when everything else tells us to give up. The man who rejected you, he is the fool. He had a chance at something real, and he threw it away because he was too shallow to see value beyond a pretty face." Grace glanced at him, something vulnerable in her expression. "You think there is value in me beyond my appearance?" "I know there is," Adam said firmly. "I have seen it today in everything you do. The way you work without complaint, the way you think about the land and what it could become, the way you face hardship without losing your dignity. That is worth more than any conventional beauty." She ducked her head, but he saw the pleased flush on her cheeks. "You are kind to say so." "I am honest," Adam corrected. "There is a difference." As the sun began to set, painting the Wyoming sky in shades of orange and purple, they walked back to the cabin together. Adam felt a contentment he had not experienced in years, a sense of rightness that came from more than just the satisfaction of a productive day. Grace's presence had changed something fundamental about the space, had transformed his solitary existence into something that felt like the beginning of a shared life. They ate dinner together, a simple meal of fried potatoes and onions with the last of the bacon, and Adam found himself reluctant for the evening to end. Grace seemed to feel the same way, lingering over her coffee, asking questions about the surrounding area, about Belmont and the people who lived there. "I have not been to town in a week," Adam admitted. "I usually go on Saturdays for supplies and to sell whatever extra vegetables I have. People know me there, but I would not say I have many friends. I keep to myself mostly." "That sounds lonely," Grace said softly. "It is," Adam agreed, "but I've gotten used to it, or I thought I had anyway." Grace met his eyes across the table. "And now?" "Now I remember what it is like to have someone to talk to," Adam said. "I had forgotten how much easier everything feels when you are not carrying the weight alone." They cleaned up together, washing and drying dishes in companionable silence, and then Grace excused herself to her room. Adam sat by the fire for a while, smoking his pipe and thinking about the strange turn his life had taken. This morning he had been alone, resigned to his solitary existence. Tonight, he had a woman sleeping under his roof, a woman who was becoming important to him with startling speed. He knew he needed to be careful. Grace was vulnerable, dependent on him for food and shelter, and the last thing he wanted was to take advantage of that vulnerability. But he could not deny the pull he felt toward her, the way his heart had lightened at her presence, the way he was already dreading the possibility of her leaving. Adam went to bed that night with his mind full of possibilities and his heart full of cautious hope. The next few weeks fell into a pattern that felt both new and ancient, as if they were establishing rhythms that had existed somewhere beyond memory. Adam and Grace rose with the sun, worked side by side through the heat of the day, and spent their evenings in quiet conversation that ranged from practical discussions of the garden to deeper explorations of their pasts and their dreams. Grace proved to be everything Adam could have hoped for in a partner. She worked tirelessly, her hands becoming calloused and strong as she helped him clear the new section of land near the creek. They planted beans and squash, potatoes and carrots, working in the rich soil until their backs ached and their muscles trembled with exhaustion. But there was joy in the work too, satisfaction in seeing the seeds they planted begin to sprout and grow. Adam found himself watching Grace when she was not looking, admiring the way the sun brought out the red highlights in her dark hair, the way her face softened when she smiled, which was happening more and more frequently as the days passed. She had begun to fill out a little, the gauntness leaving her cheeks as she ate regular meals, and the fear had faded from her eyes, replaced by something that looked like contentment. They went to town together on the third Saturday after Grace had arrived, loading the wagon with vegetables to sell at the general store. Adam was nervous about how the townspeople would react to Grace, but he kept his concerns to himself as they rode the 5 miles to Belmont. The town was busy when they arrived, farmers and ranchers coming in for supplies, women shopping for the week's provisions. Adam helped Grace down from the wagon, acutely aware of the curious stares they were attracting. He ignored them and led the way into the general store, where Samuel Morrison, the proprietor, greeted them with raised eyebrows. "Adam Harlow," Samuel said, "And who might this be?" "This is Grace Orson," Adam said evenly. "She is working on my land, helping me expand the garden." "Grace, this is Samuel Morrison. He buys most of my vegetables." Samuel's eyes flickered between them, clearly making calculations, but his expression remained professional. "Welcome to Belmont, Miss Orson. Adam's vegetables are always of good quality. I hope you will help him keep up that standard." "I will do my best," Grace said, her voice steady despite the attention they were receiving from other customers. They conducted their business efficiently, Samuel agreeing to take everything they had brought and paying a fair price. As they were leaving, a woman approached them, well-dressed and in her 40s with sharp eyes and a kind smile. "Adam Harlow, you have been keeping secrets," she said, but her tone was teasing rather than accusatory. "I am Margaret Foster. My husband owns the saloon." "You must be the young woman I have heard whispers about." "Grace Orson," Grace said, offering her hand. "I am working for Adam." Margaret shook Grace's hand firmly. "Working for him or with him?" "Both, I suppose," Grace said, glancing at Adam. "Good," Margaret said briskly. "Adam has been alone out there too long. He needs someone with sense to keep him from turning into a complete hermit. You must come to dinner next week, both of you. I will not take no for an answer." Adam found himself agreeing before he had fully processed the invitation, and Margaret swept away satisfied. Grace looked at him with amusement. "She seems formidable." "She is," Adam agreed. "But she is also kind, and if she has invited us to dinner, it means she approves of you. That will go a long way towards silencing any gossip." "Does the gossip bother you?" Grace asked as they walked back to the wagon. "Only if it bothers you," Adam said. "I stopped caring what most people think a long time ago." They were loading the last of their purchases when a man approached, tall and well-dressed, with the confident bearing of someone used to getting his way. Adam recognized him as Charles Whitmore, one of the wealthier ranchers in the area, a man who had always treated Adam with barely concealed contempt. "Harlow," Whitmore said, tipping his hat but not smiling. "I see you have acquired some help. Though I have to say, hiring a woman seems like an odd choice for farm work." "Miss Orson is more than capable," Adam said coolly. "Was there something you needed, Whitmore?" "Just making conversation," Whitmore said, his eyes on Grace in a way that made Adam's jaw tighten. "Miss, I am Charles Whitmore. I own the Double W Ranch north of here. If you ever find yourself in need of different employment, I pay well for competent help." "I am quite satisfied with my current situation," Grace said, her voice polite but firm. "Thank you for the offer." Whitmore shrugged, apparently unbothered by the rejection. "Suit yourself. Just seems a shame to waste yourself on a dirt farmer when you could work for a real operation." Adam felt anger flare hot in his chest, but Grace touched his arm lightly, a warning and a comfort all at once. "Mr. Whitmore," she said, her voice sweet but with steel underneath. "Adam has shown me more kindness and respect in 3 weeks than most men have shown me in my entire life. I would choose working with him over a dozen wealthy ranchers any day. Good afternoon." She climbed into the wagon with dignified grace, and Adam followed, snapping the reins perhaps more sharply than necessary. As they pulled away, he saw Whitmore staring after them with a mixture of surprise and irritation. "I am sorry about that," Adam said once they were out of town. "Whitmore has always been an ass, but he had no right to speak to you that way." "He did not bother me," Grace said. "Men like that, they think everything and everyone has a price. They cannot understand that some things are not for sale." Adam glanced at her, struck by the quiet dignity in her voice. "Thank you for what you said, about choosing to work with me." "I meant every word," Grace said simply. "You gave me a chance when I had nothing and no one. You have treated me with respect and fairness." That is worth more to me than all the wealth in Wyoming. Something warm unfurled in Adam's chest, something that felt dangerously close to love, but that he was not quite ready to name. They rode in comfortable silence for a while, the wagon creaking along the rutted road, the prairie stretching out on either side in waves of grass that rippled like water in the breeze. "Can I ask you something?" Grace said eventually. "Anything. Why have you never married? You are a good man, hardworking, kind. Surely there have been women who would have been happy to share your life." Adam was quiet for a moment, gathering his thoughts. "I suppose I never found anyone who understood what I wanted. Most women I met in town wanted a husband who would give them a comfortable life. A house in town, maybe, with neighbors and society. I wanted to build something here on this land. I wanted space and silence, and the satisfaction of making something grow where nothing grew before. That is not most women's idea of a good life." "It is mine," Grace said softly. Adam looked at her, his heart suddenly pounding. "Is it?" "I spent years in a city where I could barely see the sky," Grace said. "I worked in a building where the air was thick with lint and the sound of machines. I lived in a room barely big enough to turn around in, surrounded by people but always alone. Here I can breathe. I can see for miles. I can put my hands in the soil and watch things grow. This feels more like living than anything I have ever known." "Grace," Adam said, and then stopped, not sure what he wanted to say, not sure he had the right to say it even if he knew. She looked at him expectantly, and he forced himself to focus on the road ahead. "I am glad you feel that way. I am glad you are here." "So am I," Grace said, and her hand brushed against his on the wagon seat. A touch so light it might have been accidental, but that sent electricity racing up his arm. That night after dinner, they sat outside watching the stars emerge in the darkening sky. The air was warm and sweet with the scent of growing things, and Adam felt a peace he had not known he was capable of feeling. Grace sat beside him on the porch steps, close enough that he could feel the warmth of her presence. "Tell me about your mother," Grace said. "You have mentioned her several times, but always in passing." Adam leaned back against the post, letting his mind drift to memories he usually kept locked away. "She was strong. She had to be, married to my father. He was not a bad man when he was sober, but he was drunk more often than not, especially after they lost the baby." "You had a sibling?" Grace asked gently. "I was supposed to," Adam said. "A sister. My mother was 7 months along when something went wrong. The baby died, and my mother nearly died too. After that, my father started drinking more, working less. My mother held everything together by sheer force of will. She kept the house, tended the garden, raised me, and tried to keep my father from completely destroying himself. When I was 15, she caught pneumonia one winter and did not recover. My father lasted 3 more years before the drink finally killed him." "I am sorry," Grace said. "That is a heavy burden to carry." "We all carry something," Adam said. "You have had your share of losses too." "True," Grace agreed. "But I think maybe we have both carried our burdens alone for long enough. Maybe it is time we learn to share the weight." Adam turned to look at her, her face soft in the starlight, her eyes reflecting the distant shine of the Milky Way. "Is that what we are doing?" "Sharing the weight, I think so," Grace said. "At least, I hope so. These past weeks, working beside you, talking with you, it has felt like, I do not know, like finding a piece of myself I did not know was missing. Does that sound foolish?" "No," Adam said, his voice rough with emotion. "It sounds like exactly how I feel." They sat in silence for a while longer, and then Grace stood, brushing off her skirt. "I should go to bed. Tomorrow we need to finish weeding the potato patch." "Grace," Adam said, standing as well, "I am glad you came here. I am glad you took those berries from my garden. If you had not, we might never have met. Grace smiled, a radiant expression that made Adam's breath catch. Then I am glad I was hungry and desperate and brave enough to admit what I had done. Good night, Adam. Good night, Grace. The summer deepened, the days growing longer and hotter, and the garden flourished under their combined care. The vegetables they had planted by the creek grew lush and abundant, and Adam found himself thinking less about survival and more about abundance, about the future, about possibilities he had not dared to consider before. He and Grace developed a language of glances and small gestures, an intimacy that was not physical but that felt profound nonetheless. He learned to read her moods in the set of her shoulders, the tilt of her head. She learned to anticipate his needs, handing him tools before he asked for them, bringing water when he was thirsty, offering companionship when he was quiet. They had dinner with Margaret and Thomas Foster in town, and it was both awkward and pleasant. Margaret asked pointed questions about their living arrangements, but she did so with such warmth and obvious good intentions that Grace answered without defensiveness. By the end of the evening, Margaret had declared Grace a sensible young woman with good character, and Thomas had told Adam he was lucky to have found such a hard-working partner. Partner, Adam repeated as they drove home that night. I like how that sounds. Better than employee, Grace teased. Much better, Adam said. Though to be honest, Grace, you stopped feeling like an employee after about the second day. You have felt like, well, like something more, something I do not quite have the words for. Maybe we do not need words, Grace said softly. Maybe what we are building together speaks for itself. As August arrived, bringing with it the brutal heat that could bake the land hard as stone, they fell into a new pattern. They worked in the early mornings and late evenings, resting during the hottest part of the day in the relative cool of the cabin. Grace began cooking more elaborate meals, experimenting with the vegetables from the garden, and Adam found himself looking forward to dinner time with an anticipation that had nothing to do with hunger for food. One afternoon, as they sat in the shade avoiding the worst of the heat, Grace said, Adam, can I ask you something personal? Of course. Do you ever think about having a family, children? Adam felt his heart skip. I used to. When I was younger, I imagined having a wife and a house full of kids, teaching them to work the land, watching them grow. But as the years passed and I stayed alone, I stopped letting myself think about it. It hurt too much to want something that seemed impossible. And now? Grace asked, her eyes on his face. Now I am starting to let myself hope again, Adam admitted. You have changed things for me, Grace. You have made me remember that life is more than just survival, that there can be joy and partnership and love. The word hung in the air between them, huge and terrifying and inevitable. Grace drew in a sharp breath, and Adam rushed on before he lost his courage. I know it has only been a couple of months. I know you came here looking for one thing and found something completely different. I know I have no right to your affection, that you depend on me for your livelihood and your safety, and I would never want you to feel pressured or obligated. But Grace, I have to be honest with you. I am falling in love with you. Maybe I already have fallen. You are in my thoughts from the moment I wake until the moment I sleep. The work feels lighter because you are beside me. The silence feels full because you are in it. I do not want an employee or even just a partner. I want, God help me, I want a wife. I want you. Grace's eyes had filled with tears, and she was staring at him with an expression he could not quite read. Adam felt panic rising in his chest. He had said too much, pushed too hard, ruined everything. I am sorry, he said quickly. I should not have said all that. Please just forget I spoke. I do not want to make you uncomfortable or feel like you have to leave. Adam, Grace said, and her voice was shaking. Adam, stop. Please stop. He fell silent, miserable, certain he had destroyed the best thing that had ever happened to him. Grace reached out and took his hand, lacing her fingers through his. "I am crying because I am happy, you foolish man. I am crying because I have been falling in love with you too, and I was afraid to say anything because I thought you might just see me as someone you had to help, someone you felt responsible for. I thought maybe your kindness was just your nature, not something specific to me." "It is specific to you," Adam said fiercely, gripping her hand. "Everything is specific to you. The way I feel when you smile, the way my heart lifts when I hear your voice, the way I cannot imagine this place, this life, without you in it. That is all you, Grace. All you." She was laughing and crying at the same time now, and she leaned forward and kissed him, a soft, tentative press of lips that sent fire racing through Adam's veins. He cupped her face with his free hand, deepening the kiss, pouring all his longing and hope and love into the contact. When they finally pulled apart, they were both breathing hard and Grace's eyes were shining. "So this is real," she whispered. "We are real as the earth and the sky," Adam said. "As real as anything I have ever known. Grace Orson, will you marry me? Will you be my wife, my partner, my love for however long we both shall live?" "Yes," Grace said, laughing. "Yes, yes, 1,000 times yes. I will marry you, Adam Harlow. I will stand beside you and work with you and love you for all my days." They kissed again, longer this time, and Adam felt as if he were being remade, transformed from a lonely man into half of something greater and more beautiful than he had ever imagined possible. When they finally broke apart, they sat with their foreheads pressed together, breathing in sync, marveling at the miracle of finding each other. "We should go to town tomorrow," Adam said. "See the preacher, make it official as soon as possible." "What is the hurry?" Grace asked, amused. "I have waited 26 years to find you," Adam said. "I do not want to wait another moment longer than necessary to call you my wife." Grace kissed him again, soft and sweet. "Then tomorrow we will go to town. Tomorrow we will start our life together officially." "But Adam, in my heart, we already belong to each other. We have belonged to each other since the moment you saw me taking berries and chose kindness instead of anger." "I would make that choice 1,000 times over," Adam said. "Every path that led me to you was worth walking." They spent the rest of the afternoon making plans, talking about the wedding, about their future, about the life they would build together. As the heat began to break and the sun started its descent, they went back to work, but everything felt different now, charged with new meaning. They were not just working the land anymore. They were building a foundation for their marriage, for their family, for the legacy they would create together. That evening, as they sat down to dinner, Adam raised his glass of water in a toast. "To the woman who stole my berries and captured my heart. To the man who gave me a garden and a home and a love I never knew existed," Grace responded, clinking her glass against his. They drank, their eyes locked, and Adam felt a completeness he had never experienced before. All the lonely years, all the hard work, all the struggles had led him to this moment, to this woman, to this love. And he knew with absolute certainty that he would spend the rest of his life being grateful for the day Grace Orson had appeared at the edge of his property, desperate and hungry and brave enough to admit she had taken something that did not belong to her. He had given her the garden, and in return, she had given him everything that mattered. The next morning dawned clear and bright, and Adam woke with a sense of purpose and joy that made him feel decades younger. He dressed carefully in his best clothes, clothes he usually only wore to church on the rare occasions he attended, and knocked softly on Grace's door. "I am almost ready," she called, and when she emerged a few minutes later, Adam felt his breath catch. She wore a simple dress, clean and pressed, and she had woven small wildflowers into her hair. She looked beautiful, radiant, and completely his. "You look lovely," he said, his voice husky. "Thank you," Grace said, blushing. "I wanted to look nice for our wedding day." They took the wagon to town, the journey feeling both endless and far too short. Adam's mind raced with a mixture of excitement and nervousness. They would need witnesses for the ceremony, and he hoped that Samuel Morrison and his wife would agree to stand for them. He worried briefly about what the townspeople would think, a wedding happening so quickly. But then he looked at Grace beside him and decided he did not care. When they arrived in Belmont, they went directly to the small church at the edge of town. Reverend Michaels, a kind man in his 50s who had buried Adam's parents, looked surprised to see them but welcomed them warmly. "Adam Harlow," he said, shaking Adam's hand. "What brings you to town on a Thursday morning, and who is this lovely young lady?" "This is Grace Orson," Adam said. "And we have come to ask you to marry us." Reverend Michael's eyebrows rose. "Marry you? Well, that is wonderful news. When were you thinking? Next month. I will need to post the banns, of course, and we should plan a proper ceremony." "We were hoping for today," Grace said, "if that is possible." The Reverend looked between them, his expression thoughtful. "Today? That is quite sudden. Is there a particular reason for the hurry?" "We love each other," Adam said simply. "And we do not want to wait. There is nothing improper in our relationship, Reverend, if that is what you are wondering. Grace has been working on my land, helping me with the garden, and we have found that we wish to spend our lives together. We are both of age, both of sound mind, and we have no impediments to marriage. Will you help us?" Reverend Michael studied them for a long moment, and then his face broke into a warm smile. "You know, I have known you since you were a boy, Adam. I have watched you struggle with grief and loneliness, working that land by yourself, never complaining but never truly happy either. Today, I see something in your eyes I have not seen in years. Joy. And Miss Orson, you look at him the same way. If two people are certain of their love, who am I to tell them to wait? Let me get my wife and Samuel Morrison, and we will conduct the ceremony this morning." Relief and gratitude flooded through Adam. "Thank you, Reverend. Thank you so much." The Reverend's wife, Martha, proved to be as kind as her husband, immediately taking Grace under her wing and exclaiming over how wonderful it was that Adam was finally getting married. Samuel Morrison and his wife agreed to stand as witnesses, and within an hour, a small group had gathered in the church. Margaret Foster appeared, summoned by some mysterious network of town communication, and she brought with her a small bouquet of flowers from her garden. "Every bride needs flowers," she said firmly, pressing them into Grace's hands. Adam stood at the front of the church, watching as Grace walked toward him down the short aisle. There was no music, no elaborate ceremony, but none of that mattered. All that mattered was the woman walking toward him with love shining in her eyes, the woman who had changed his life completely in the space of a few short weeks. Reverend Michaels conducted a simple but heartfelt ceremony. Adam repeated his vows with a steady voice, promising to love and cherish Grace, to stand by her in sickness and health, in poverty and prosperity, for as long as they both should live. Grace's voice shook with emotion as she made the same promises, but her words were clear and strong, a covenant spoken from the heart. When Reverend Michaels pronounced them husband and wife and told Adam he could kiss his bride, Adam took Grace in his arms and kissed her with all the love and devotion he possessed. The small group of witnesses applauded, and Martha Michaels wiped tears from her eyes. "Congratulations, Mr. and Mrs. Harlow," the Reverend said warmly. "May your life together be filled with love and laughter and abundant blessings." They signed the marriage certificate, Adam's hand steady as he wrote his name and then watched Grace sign hers. Grace Harlow. his wife. The reality of it filled him with a wonder that bordered on disbelief. Margaret insisted they come to the saloon for a celebratory meal, and they found themselves the center of attention as word of the wedding spread through town. Most of the well-wishers seemed genuinely happy for them, though Adam noticed Charles Whitmore watching from across the street with a sour expression. He ignored the rancher, focusing instead on his bride, on the joy of being able to call her his wife, to hold her hand openly without worrying about propriety. They stayed in town longer than Adam had planned, accepting congratulations and well wishes, but eventually they made their excuses and headed home. The sun was setting as they pulled up to the cabin, painting the sky in shades of gold and rose, and Adam helped Grace down from the wagon with exaggerated care. "You are my wife," he said, still marveling at the words. "And you are my husband," Grace replied, her eyes dancing with happiness. "Though I have to say it does not feel that different from this morning. We already belong to each other." "True," Adam agreed, "but now it is official. Now the whole world knows you are mine and I am yours." They went inside and Adam found himself suddenly uncertain. They had been living under the same roof for weeks, but everything was different now. Grace seemed to sense his nervousness, and she took his hand gently. "Adam," she said softly, "we do not have to change everything all at once. We can take our time, let things unfold naturally." "I want you to know," Adam said, "that I will never push you, never demand anything you are not ready to give. I know that being married comes with certain expectations, but I want our life together to be based on mutual respect and desire, not obligation." Grace reached up and cupped his face with her hand. "I know that about you. It is one of the reasons I love you, but Adam, I am not afraid. I chose you freely with my whole heart. I want to be your wife in every way when we are both ready." Adam pulled her into his arms, holding her close, breathing in the scent of her hair. "I love you, Grace Harlow. I love you more than I have words to express." "Then show me," Grace whispered. "Show me with actions instead of words." That night, in the quiet privacy of their home, they came together as husband and wife, discovering each other with tenderness and passion, building an intimacy that was physical and emotional and spiritual all at once. Adam had known loneliness, but he had never known this, the overwhelming rightness of being with another person, the way two separate lives could merge into something greater than the sum of their parts. Afterward they lay tangled together, Grace's head on Adam's chest, his hand stroking her hair with gentle reverence. "I never knew it could be like this," Grace said softly. "I never knew love could feel so complete." "Neither did I," Adam admitted. "I am going to spend the rest of my life trying to make you happy, Grace. That is my promise to you." "You already make me happy," Grace said. "You gave me everything when I had nothing. You saw value in me when others saw only a burden. You offered me not just work but partnership, not just shelter but a home. And now you have given me your name and your love. I have everything I could ever want." "We will build something beautiful together," Adam said. "On this land with our hands and our hearts. We will make something that lasts." "Yes," Grace agreed, pressing a kiss to his chest. "We will." The weeks that followed their wedding were among the happiest of Adam's life. He and Grace settled into married life with an ease that surprised them both, as if they had been made to fit together. The small bedroom that had been Adam's alone for so many years became theirs, and Grace brought small touches of comfort and beauty to the space. Curtains she sewed from fabric they bought in town, a quilt she pieced together from scraps during the cooler evenings. The garden continued to thrive under their combined care, and in early September they harvested vegetables in quantities Adam had never achieved before. They took wagon loads to town, selling to Samuel Morrison and directly to families, and the money they earned was more than Adam had made in any previous year. With Grace's help, he was able to think beyond mere survival to actual prosperity. "We should get chickens," Grace said one evening as they discussed their plans, "and maybe a cow. Fresh eggs and milk would be good for us, and we could sell the extra in town." "That is a good idea," Adam agreed. "And next spring we should plant those fruit trees you mentioned. It will be years before they bear fruit, but by then maybe we will have children who can help us harvest them." Grace smiled, her hand moving to her stomach in a gesture that was becoming unconscious. They had not talked directly about children since their wedding night, but the subject hovered between them, a possibility that was both exciting and a little frightening. "Would you like that?" Grace asked. "Children, very much," Adam said. "Though I confess the thought of being responsible for a small life is terrifying. What if I fail? What if I cannot provide for them the way they deserve?" "You will not fail," Grace said firmly. "You are the most responsible, hardworking man I have ever known. Any child would be lucky to have you as a father." Adam pulled her close, feeling the familiar surge of love and gratitude that overwhelmed him whenever he thought about how much his life had changed. "Any child would be lucky to have you as a mother. You are strong and smart and full of grace, despite everything you have endured." They continued to work through the fall, preparing the land for winter, preserving vegetables for the cold months ahead. Grace proved to be skilled at canning and pickling, and their small cellar filled with jars of tomatoes and beans, pickled cucumbers and beets, preserves made from the wild berries that had brought them together. As October arrived and the air turned crisp, Adam took Grace into town to buy supplies for winter, including fabric for warm clothes and thick boots to protect her feet from the cold. While they were in the general store, Martha Michaels approached them with news. "There is going to be a harvest dance at the church hall next Saturday," she said. "Everyone in the community is invited. You too should come. It would be nice for you to socialize more, to be part of the town." Adam glanced at Grace, expecting her to look hesitant, but instead she looked excited. "That sounds wonderful. I would love to go." "Then we will be there," Adam said, surprised by his own enthusiasm. He had always avoided social gatherings before, but the thought of dancing with his wife, of showing the town how happy he was, held unexpected appeal. The night of the harvest dance, they dressed in their best clothes and made the journey to town under a sky brilliant with stars. The church hall was lit with lanterns, and music spilled out into the night, fiddle and guitar playing lively tunes that made Adam's feet tap, despite his general awkwardness with dancing. Inside, the hall was crowded with families from the surrounding area. Farmers and ranchers and townspeople all gathered to celebrate a successful harvest season. Margaret Foster spotted them immediately and pulled Grace into a group of women, introducing her around, and Adam found himself standing with a group of men he knew slightly. Thomas Foster clapped him on the shoulder. "Marriage seems to agree with you, Adam. I have never seen you look so content." "It does agree with me," Adam said. She is everything I did not know I needed." "That is how a marriage should be," Thomas agreed. "My Margaret drives me crazy sometimes, but I would not trade her for anything in the world. You hold on to that woman of yours." "I intend to," Adam said. When the dancing started, Adam made his way to Grace and offered his hand. "May I have this dance, Mrs. Harlow?" "You may, Mr. Harlow," Grace said with a smile that made his heart race. They joined the other couples, and despite Adam's initial clumsiness, they found their rhythm quickly. Grace was light in his arms, following his lead with natural grace, and as they spun around the room, Adam felt a happiness so profound it almost hurt. "I love you," he said, close to her ear so she could hear him over the music. "I love you too," Grace replied, her eyes shining. They danced several more times, and between dances, they talked with neighbors, accepting congratulations on their marriage, discussing crops and weather and the small dramas of community life. Adam realized with some surprise that he was enjoying himself, that having Grace beside him made the social interaction easier, more natural. As the evening was winding down, Charles Whitmore approached them. Adam tensed, but Whitmore's expression was not hostile, merely uncomfortable. "Harlow," he said, "Mrs. Harlow, I wanted to apologize for my behavior when we first met. I was rude and presumptuous, and I am sorry for that. It is clear that you two are well matched, and I wish you happiness." Adam was so surprised he almost did not know what to say. "Thank you, Whitmore." "That is generous of you." Whitmore nodded curtly and moved away, and Grace squeezed Adam's hand. "That took courage for him. Perhaps people can surprise us." "Perhaps they can," Adam agreed. They drove home under the stars, Grace leaning against Adam's shoulder, both of them pleasantly tired from the dancing and the socializing. When they reached the cabin, Adam carried Grace over the threshold just as he had on their wedding night, making her laugh. "I can walk, you know," she said. "I know," Adam replied, "but I like carrying you. It makes me feel like I am protecting you, even if you do not need protecting." "I will always need you," Grace said softly. "Maybe not for protection, but for love, for partnership, for all the things that make life worth living." "And I will always need you," Adam replied, setting her down gently. "You are my heart, Grace. Without you, I am just a man going through the motions. With you, I am alive." Winter came early that year, bringing snow in November that blanketed the land in white and forced them to spend more time indoors. Adam had worried that the close quarters might feel confining, but instead, he found the forced intimacy deepened their bond. They spent evenings reading aloud to each other from the few books they owned, playing cards, talking about everything and nothing. Grace began to teach Adam some of the songs her father had taught her, melodies from the old country that carried a haunting beauty. Adam had a decent voice, though he rarely used it, and Grace declared herself delighted when he sang with her, their voices blending in harmony. In December, Grace confirmed what they had both begun to suspect. She was pregnant, the baby due in late spring or early summer. Adam received the news with a mixture of joy and terror so intense he could barely speak. "Are you happy?" Grace asked, watching his face anxiously. "Happy does not begin to cover it," Adam managed. "Terrified, elated, overwhelmed, grateful beyond words. Grace, we are going to be parents." "We are," Grace said, laughing and crying at the same time. "Are you ready?" "Probably not," Adam admitted. "But I do not think anyone is ever truly ready. We will figure it out together just like we have figured out everything else." Grace pulled him into a kiss, deep and sweet and full of promise. "Together," she agreed. "Always together." The winter months passed slowly, the world outside frozen and quiet while inside the cabin life continued warm and full. Adam found himself thinking about the future in ways he never had before, imagining a child running through the garden, learning to work the land, carrying on the legacy he and Grace were building. He built a cradle during the long winter evenings, working the wood with careful hands, wanting everything to be perfect for their child. Grace sewed tiny clothes, blankets, and diapers, preparing for the baby with a thoroughness that Adam found both touching and slightly overwhelming. "Do you think we have enough?" she would ask, surveying the small pile of baby items. "I think we have plenty," Adam would assure her. "And if we need more, we will make it or buy it. Our child will be loved and cared for. That is what matters most." As winter gave way to spring, Grace's pregnancy became more visible, her belly swelling with their growing child. Adam found himself constantly concerned for her welfare, not wanting her to overwork, but Grace insisted on helping with the spring planting. "I am pregnant, not ill," she said when Adam tried to make her rest. "Women have been working while pregnant since the beginning of time. I will not break." "I know," Adam said, "but you are precious to me and I cannot help but worry." "Worry less and trust more," Grace said, but she kissed him to take the sting from her words. "I promise I will tell you if I need to rest, but I feel strong and I want to help. This land is ours together, and I want to be part of everything we build." So they worked side by side as spring turned to summer, planting the garden, tending the chickens they had bought in April, milking the gentle cow Adam had purchased in May. The land seemed to respond to their care with abundance, everything growing lush and healthy, and Adam could not help but see it as a good omen. In early June, on a morning when the sun was just beginning to warm the earth, Grace woke Adam with a quiet urgency. "It is time. The baby is coming." Adam's heart nearly stopped. They had prepared for this moment, had made plans, but suddenly all his preparations seemed woefully inadequate. He helped Grace dress, his hands shaking, and then rode into town as fast as the horse could carry him to fetch Martha Michaels, who had agreed to help with the birth. Martha came immediately, her calm competence a steadying presence, and she took charge of the situation with efficient kindness. She sent Adam to boil water and gather clean linens, giving him tasks to keep him occupied while she attended to Grace. The day stretched into evening, and Adam paced outside the bedroom door, listening to Grace's labored breathing, her occasional cries of pain, and feeling utterly helpless. He had faced harsh weather, hard work, and the cruelty of an uncertain world, but nothing had prepared him for the terror of hearing the woman he loved in pain and being unable to help. Finally, as the sun was setting, he heard a different sound. The thin, reedy cry of a newborn baby, followed by Martha's voice raised in triumph. "It is a boy, a healthy baby boy." Adam burst through the door to find Grace propped up in bed, exhausted and radiant, holding a small bundle wrapped in a clean blanket. Martha was cleaning up, smiling broadly, and the room smelled of sweat and blood and new life. "Come meet your son," Grace said, her voice hoarse but filled with love. Adam crossed to the bed on shaking legs and looked down at the tiny face peeking out of the blanket. The baby had a shock of dark hair and eyes that were unfocused but seemed to be trying to see everything at once. He was perfect, absolutely perfect, and Adam felt tears streaming down his face. "He is beautiful," Adam whispered. "Grace, he is so beautiful. Are you all right?" "I am fine," Grace assured him. "Tired, sore, but fine. Hold him." She transferred the baby into Adam's arms, and he held his son for the first time, this tiny life that he and Grace had created together. The baby squirmed and made small snuffling sounds, and Adam felt his heart expand in a way he had not known was possible. "What should we name him?" Grace asked. They had discussed names over the winter, but had not decided on anything final. Adam looked down at his son, this child who represented everything good in his life, everything he and Grace had built together. "What about Joshua?" Adam suggested. "It was my grandfather's name, my mother's father. He was a good man, hardworking and kind. I would be honored to pass his name to our son." "Joshua Harlow," Grace said, testing the sound of it. "I like it. It is strong but gentle. Yes, let us name him Joshua." Martha stayed the night, helping Grace settle, making sure both mother and baby were comfortable and healthy. She left in the morning with promises to check on them in a few days, and then Adam and Grace were alone with their son. The first weeks of Joshua's life passed in a blur of sleepless nights and constant wonder. Adam discovered that he could function on far less sleep than he had thought possible, driven by the need to help Grace, to care for his son, to make sure his family was safe and happy. Grace recovered well from the birth, regaining her strength quickly, and together they navigated the challenges of new parenthood with the same partnership that had defined their marriage from the beginning. Adam learned to change diapers and soothe a crying baby, to walk the floor at 2 in the morning singing the lullabies Grace had taught him. He found that fatherhood suited him, that the love he felt for his son was different from but just as profound as the love he felt for Grace. Joshua was a good baby, generally content, and Adam spent hours just watching him sleep, marveling at the tiny perfect features, the small hands that gripped his finger with surprising strength. As summer progressed and Joshua grew, Adam and Grace resumed their work in the garden, though at a slower pace than before. They took turns, one of them always with the baby while the other worked, and they discovered that life with a child required constant adjustment and compromise. One evening in August, as they sat on the porch watching the sunset with Joshua sleeping in Grace's arms, Adam felt a contentment so complete he could barely contain it. He looked at his wife, his son, his land spread out before him in the golden evening light, and he thought about the strange journey that had brought them to this moment. "You remember the day we met?" he asked Grace. "Of course," Grace said, smiling. "I was stealing your berries, desperate and terrified, certain my life was over. I saw you and thought you were the most beautiful thing I had ever seen," Adam said. "Even covered in dirt, even frightened, you were beautiful. And then you were brave enough to admit what you had done, and I knew there was something special about you. You could have sent me away," Grace said. "Most men would have. But you chose kindness. You offered me work and safety and eventually love. You saved my life, Adam." "No," Adam said firmly. "We saved each other. You gave me a reason to live instead of just survive. You made this place a home instead of just a piece of land. You gave me a family, a purpose, a future worth building. I was the one who was lost, Grace, and you found me." Grace leaned her head against his shoulder, careful not to disturb the sleeping baby. "Then we found each other, and we built something beautiful together." "Yes," Adam agreed. "We did, and we will keep building for Joshua and for any other children we might have, for ourselves, for the future." "I love you, Adam Harlow," Grace said. "I love you more than I have words to express. You are the best man I have ever known, and I am grateful every single day that I took those berries from your garden." "And I love you, Grace Harlow," Adam replied. "You are my heart, my home, my everything. And I will spend the rest of my life being grateful that you were brave enough to admit you were hungry, that you gave me the chance to help you, to know you, to love you." They sat in comfortable silence as the sun disappeared below the horizon, and the stars began to emerge, the same stars that had witnessed their first kiss, their wedding, the birth of their son. The prairie stretched out around them, vast and timeless, and Adam felt connected to something larger than himself, to the land and the sky and the endless cycle of seasons that would continue long after he was gone. But for now, he was here, with his wife and his son, living a life he had once thought impossible. He had gone from being a lonely cowboy to being a husband and father, from isolation to belonging, from mere survival to actual joy. And it had all started with a woman desperate enough to steal berries and honest enough to admit it, and a man lonely enough to see her hunger and choose compassion over anger. The years passed with the steady rhythm of the seasons, each one bringing new challenges and new joys. Joshua grew from a baby into a sturdy toddler, then into a curious little boy who followed Adam around the garden with endless questions, and an eagerness to help that was both endearing and occasionally exasperating. When Joshua was 3, Grace gave birth to their second child, a daughter they named Sarah after Grace's mother. The birth was easier than Joshua's had been, and Adam found himself somewhat less terrified the second time around, though no less in awe of his wife's strength and courage. Sarah was a placid baby with Grace's storm-gray eyes and a sunny disposition that charmed everyone who met her. Joshua was initially suspicious of this small person who demanded so much of his mother's attention, but he quickly became a devoted big brother, always wanting to help care for the baby. The garden continued to expand and thrive under their care. They planted the fruit trees Grace had suggested years ago, apple and cherry trees that would bear fruit for their children and their children's children. They built a proper chicken coop and expanded their small herd of cattle, diversifying in ways that made their income more stable and their future more secure. Adam had long since paid off the debts his father had left, and now he was actually making a profit from the land, enough to think about improvements and expansions rather than just survival. He built an addition onto the cabin, creating more space for their growing family, and he dug a new well closer to the house to make Grace's work easier. The town of Belmont grew as well, attracting new settlers, new businesses, and the railroad brought more opportunities for trade. Adam and Grace became respected members of the community, known for their hard work, their integrity, and their visible devotion to each other and their children. Margaret Foster remained a good friend, visiting often and bringing news from town. Thomas Foster offered Adam fair prices for his vegetables at the saloon, and Reverend and Martha Michaels became like family, always ready with support and advice when needed. When Joshua was 5 and Sarah was 2, Grace discovered she was pregnant again. This time the news brought pure joy without the terror, a confidence born of experience. Their third child, a son they named Daniel, was born in the spring of 1888, completing their family. Adam was 32 now, Grace 28, and they had built a life that exceeded anything either of them had dreamed possible. The cabin had become a proper house, expanded and improved, surrounded by flourishing gardens and productive fields. The land that had once felt like a burden to Adam now felt like a blessing, a legacy he could pass to his children with pride. On a summer evening in 1889, as Adam and Grace watched their 3 children playing in the yard, Grace leaned against him with a contented sigh. Joshua was 7 now, tall for his age and serious-minded, already showing an interest in the mechanics of farming. Sarah was 4, imaginative and talkative, always spinning stories about the flowers and the chickens. Daniel was barely walking, tottering around with the determined wobbliness of a toddler. "Can you believe this is our life?" Grace said. "Sometimes I still feel like I will wake up and find myself back in New York, alone and working in that horrible factory." "This is real," Adam assured her, pulling her close. "All of this is real. You, me, our children, this land, this life we have built together. It is all real and it is ours." "I know," Grace said, "but it still feels like a miracle sometimes. That you found me, or I found you, or however it happened. That you saw something worth saving in a desperate woman stealing berries from your garden." "I saw everything worth having," Adam said, "and I was right. Giving you those berries, giving you the garden, giving you my heart, it was the best decision I ever made. You changed my life, Grace. You made me realize that being alone was not the same as being strong, that asking for help and offering it was not weakness but wisdom." "We changed each other," Grace said. "I was running from a failed dream when I came here, certain that I would always be unwanted, always be alone. You showed me that I was worth loving, that I had value beyond what I could produce in a factory or how well I fit someone's idea of beauty." You gave me a home and a family and a purpose. You gave me everything." Joshua came running over, his face flushed with exertion. "Papa, can we go fishing tomorrow? You promised you would teach me." "I did promise that," Adam agreed. "Early in the morning before it gets too hot." "You will have to get up before dawn." "I can do that," Joshua said eagerly. "I want to learn everything you can teach me about the land and the water and how to take care of things." Adam ruffled his son's hair affectionately. "Then tomorrow we will start. Go play with your sister and brother for a bit longer. Mama and I are talking." Joshua ran off obediently, and Adam watched him go with a mixture of pride and poignant awareness of how quickly time was passing. His children were growing, changing every day, and he wanted to hold onto every moment, to remember every laugh, every question, every small milestone. "He is so much like you," Grace observed. "Serious, hardworking, always thinking about responsibility." "And Sarah is like you," Adam replied. "Creative, warm, seeing beauty and stories everywhere she looks. And Daniel, well, he is still figuring out who he is, but I see both of us in him." "They are good children," Grace said. "We are lucky." "We are blessed," Adam corrected. "Luck implies randomness. What we have, we built with intention and love and hard work. That is not luck. That is grace." Grace smiled at the wordplay on her name. "Grace and hard work. I suppose that is a good combination." As the evening deepened and they called the children inside for supper, Adam felt a deep gratitude for the life he was living. He thought about the young man he had been at 26, isolated and resigned to loneliness, going through the motions of living without really experiencing life. That man seemed like a stranger now, someone from a different existence entirely. Grace had changed everything. Her courage in admitting she had taken something that did not belong to her, his decision to respond with kindness instead of anger, had set in motion a chain of events that transformed them both. They had built a partnership based on mutual respect and affection, a love that deepened with every passing year, a family that was the center of both their worlds. After the children were in bed, Adam and Grace sat together by the fire, Grace mending a shirt while Adam carved a small wooden horse for Daniel. The domestic scene was peaceful, ordinary, and utterly precious to both of them. "Do you ever think about what your life would have been like if we had not met?" Grace asked, her needle flashing in the firelight. "Sometimes," Adam admitted. "I think I would have survived. I would have kept working the land, kept to myself, kept going through the motions. But I would not have lived, not really. I would have missed all of this, everything that makes life worth living. What about you?" "I do not like to think about it," Grace said quietly. "I was in such a dark place when I arrived in Wyoming. I had no money, no prospects, no hope. If you had not helped me, I do not know what would have become of me. I might have starved or worse. You saved me, Adam." "We saved each other," Adam insisted. "You gave me a reason to live beyond just existing. You made me remember that connection and love and family were possible. You made me whole, Grace." Grace set down her mending and moved to sit beside Adam on the small sofa he had built. She rested her head on his shoulder and he put his arm around her, the wooden horse temporarily forgotten. "I love you," she said simply. "After all these years, after everything we have been through, I love you more now than I did the day we married." "I love you too," Adam replied. "And I will love you until my last breath and beyond. You are my heart, Grace. You always will be." They sat in comfortable silence, the fire crackling softly, the house quiet around them. Through the window, Adam could see the garden they had planted together, the land they had cultivated with their own hands, the legacy they were creating for their children. Everything he had, everything he was, he owed in part to the woman beside him. The years continued to pass, bringing both joys and sorrows as all lives do. Adam's body aged, his hands becoming more gnarled with arthritis, his back sometimes aching from a lifetime of hard work. But Grace was always there, adapting their routines, helping when he needed it without making him feel diminished. Their children grew into capable young adults. Joshua proved to have Adam's dedication and Grace's intelligence, taking over more and more of the farm work as he matured. Sarah became a teacher in Belmont, beloved by her students, bringing home stories of the town and the world beyond their land. Daniel, the youngest, inherited his mother's love of growing things and his father's patience, developing a particular talent for cultivating the fruit trees and berry bushes that had become a significant part of their farm's income. In the spring of 1905, when Adam was 49 and Grace was 45, Joshua married a kind young woman named Elizabeth, and they built a house on the far edge of Adam and Grace's property. It brought Adam profound satisfaction to see his eldest son settling down, starting his own family, continuing the legacy that he and Grace had begun. When Elizabeth gave birth to their first child, a boy they named Adam after his grandfather, Adam held his grandson and felt the circle of life completing itself in a way that was both humbling and joyful. This tiny infant represented the future, the continuation of everything he and Grace had built together. "He has your eyes," Grace said, watching Adam cradle the baby. "Our legacy, Adam. This is what we created, not just the land and the garden, but this family, these connections, this love that will continue long after we are gone." "It is more than I ever dreamed possible," Adam said, his voice thick with emotion. "When I think about where we started, when I remember that lonely man I used to be, it seems impossible that I could have all of this." "But you do," Grace said. "We do. We took a chance on each other and it changed everything." As the years moved toward 1910 and beyond, Adam and Grace gradually stepped back from the day-to-day work of the farm, letting their children and grandchildren take over while they enjoyed a slower pace of life. They spent their days in the garden Grace still tended with loving care, watching their grandchildren play in the same spaces where their children had played years before. On a particular evening in the summer of 1912, Adam and Grace sat on the porch of the house they had expanded and improved over 30 years of marriage. Adam was 56 now, his hair almost entirely gray, his face weathered by decades of sun and wind. Grace was 52, her dark hair threaded with silver, her face lined but still beautiful, still the face that had captured his heart so many years ago. They watched as their extended family gathered for a Sunday dinner, children and grandchildren filling the house with noise and laughter and life. Joshua and Elizabeth were there with their 3 children. Sarah had come from town with her husband and their 2 daughters, and Daniel was courting a young woman from a neighboring farm who seemed likely to become part of the family soon. "We did well," Grace said, taking Adam's hand. "Look at all of this. Look at what grew from the day I took berries from your garden and you chose kindness." "We did more than well," Adam said. "We built something that will last, Grace. Long after we are gone, this land will be here, and our family will be here, and the love we share will echo through generations." Grace squeezed his hand, her eyes bright with tears of joy. "Do you remember what you said to me once? That you gave me the garden and I gave you everything that mattered." "I remember," Adam said. "You were wrong," Grace said gently. "We gave each other everything that mattered. We built this life together, we created this family together, we learned to love together. It was never one person giving and the other receiving. It was always both of us, always partnership, always together." Adam nodded, accepting the truth of her words. "You are right. As usual, We did this together, and that is what made it work. Not my land or your courage, but our willingness to trust each other, to work together, to build something bigger than ourselves. As the sun set over the Wyoming prairie, painting the sky in brilliant shades of orange and purple, Adam pulled Grace close and kissed her forehead with the tenderness of 3 decades of love. Around them, their family laughed and talked, and the garden they had planted together decades ago continued to flourish, heavy with fruit and vegetables that would feed them all. "I love you, Grace Harlow," Adam said. "From the moment I saw you taking berries from my garden to this very second and beyond. You are my life, my love, my everything." "And I love you, Adam Harlow," Grace replied. "You gave me hope when I had none, a home when I was lost, and a love that has sustained me through everything. You are my heart, and you always will be." They sat together as the stars began to emerge, the same stars that had witnessed their first meeting, their wedding, the births of their children, and now this moment of contentment and reflection. The land stretched out before them, the land they had worked and nurtured and loved, and it would continue long after they were gone, a testament to what 2 people could build when they chose love over fear, partnership over isolation, hope over despair. The story that had begun with a hungry woman stealing berries and a lonely cowboy choosing kindness had grown into something far greater than either of them could have imagined. It had become a family, a legacy, a love that would echo through generations. And as Adam and Grace sat together in the gathering dusk, surrounded by the fruits of their labor and their love, they knew they had lived a life worth living, had built something worth building, had loved in a way that would never be forgotten. The garden they had planted together, both literal and metaphorical, would continue to grow and flourish, fed by the love they had nurtured and the partnership they had forged. And that, they both knew, was the greatest gift they could give to the future, the truest measure of a life well lived together.